Thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Frederick.
You just got married this weekend.
That's right, on Friday, last Friday. Yeah.
This is your honeymoon.
That's right.
Thank you. Are you going on a honeymoon?
Yeah, eventually, in early January, yeah, when the weather's nicer in other parts of the world.
Here I thought you were coming to us for your honeymoon. You've been the CTO, you've been at Azure for quite a while, I think just over 10 years at this point.
I started in July of 2010, so just past 9 years. Yeah.
And you've been CTO for 5 years.
That's right.
A lot has changed in those last 5 years.
Yeah.
What has changed?
What has changed?
Yeah.
A lot has changed. One thing, cloud is not a question like it was still 5 years ago. Cloud is kind of a lot of companies view it as a must-do at this point. Azure is significantly larger than it was, multiple times, probably somewhere between 10 and 20 times larger than it was 5 years ago.
When you say larger, you mean just
footprint? Capacity, yeah. Number of regions, number of services, number of people working on Azure.
If you say more enterprises are moving to the cloud now, what was that like 5 years ago?
So it's been kind of fascinating to watch how enterprises looked at cloud from starting back in 2010 when I first got involved with it. Back then it was shadow IT, and there was a few companies doing dev test, but largely enterprise was not really aware. Cloud wasn't on most of their radars. And then I kind of saw enterprises start to get interested in what is this cloud thing, what are my people doing with shadow IT, I want to better understand it. Then I saw first wave of enterprise cloud adoption, kind of the first movers starting to say, hey, we're going to go to the cloud. Then some time passed, and then I saw a second wave of adopters that had kind of not been paying attention, not done it much with the cloud through that first wave. This is about 3 years ago, and I saw that wave of adoption start to happen. And it was really at that point that a lot of these companies that had been watching from the sidelines saw that the cloud had gotten mature enough in terms of its capability and security and reliability that they could start looking at moving to it. And then now what I'm seeing is yet another wave, and this is kind of the bulk of IT, I think, is now, the bulk of the enterprise is now looking at how to get up to the cloud.
Has it surprised you how long it's taken?
A little bit. I mean, I thought it would go faster than it has, but I think it's kind of gone as fast as I think the system can support it going. If I take a look at just in Azure, keeping up with this kind of growth, we've been growing as fast as we possibly can, and it's barely keeping up with the demand that we're seeing. So I think in some ways we're fortunate that it hasn't been faster.
Can you just buy more servers?
We're buying and building as fast as we can.
But
yeah.
they're not making enough for you?
Well, there's a lot of complexity when it comes to growing 10x scales. A lot of systems, a lot of processes, a lot of maturity has to happen to be able to run at that kind of scale, and to get the efficiency to build out when you're doubling your capacity one time, when you're doubling it again the next time, the systems have to improve to be able to do that. So. It's all of that kind of growth of the infrastructure, of the processes, the tools, the people that have had to happen.
Totally. 5 years ago, what were the stumbling blocks for some of those companies that just couldn't be part, maybe wanted to be part of that first wave, but just couldn't do it?
I think a big one is skills. Skills and culture at the companies. I mean, I definitely see this kind of struggle still playing out within some enterprise organizations where you have an IT department that is built an on-premises environment. They're proud of it. They've invested a lot in it. The people that have risen in the company have made their careers on it, and now they're seeing this pressure to go to the cloud. And there's some resistance naturally in terms of, hey, what we've got is working great. What's that going to do for me? There's resistance in just naturally, this is what I'm used to doing, and I like to keep doing it this way. So, and then once they decide to make that move, just figuring out how to do it. How do I operate the cloud? What kind of skills the people that were running physical networks on premises, what do they do when it comes to cloud software-defined networks? I'm not going around and patching databases anymore. So what do I have to do when it comes to managing a PaaS database service? It's a lot of that. And then enterprise developers, too, that go along with it. A lot of reskilling that obviously has to happen there, and switch to a DevOps mentality.
Sure. Is that something that happened inside of Microsoft as well?
Yeah,
as you were
absolutely.
building?
Yeah, and that's related to the kind of transformation. And while we were growing, is also undergoing that transformation from a box product company into a services company.
Sure.
I saw that very clearly when I moved into Azure in 2010. Azure had just commercially launched in February. Microsoft was still a Windows Office company, very great at delivering the kind of waterfall box product.
Sure. There
model.
was still Windows Phone.
That's right. Yeah, there was still a Windows Phone back then.
Not anymore.
Yeah. But in that process, we had dev, test, PM. We had 3-year ship cycles, 2 or 3-year ship cycles, and Azure. A lot of the people that were in Azure had come from Windows and Office and other parts of the company that were not cloud native. Like Bing was more of a services delivery at the time. So there was still a lot of that system that they inherited from the rest of Microsoft. We had dev, test, and program management inside of Azure. So we started to undergo that transformation, and one of the big changes we made is eliminating a test discipline and moving to DevOps, kind of forcing the issue. And I think that's something that IT is doing as well, is kind of, you've got to force the issue by just saying, this is the way we're going to operate now. So
you think that's something enterprises need to do, to have this top-down just command? It's time to change?
It definitely is hard for an organization to change without top-down support, right? If you can only accomplish so much bottoms-up, but if the top is saying we're going this way and the bottom is saying we're going that way, you're not going to get anywhere.
Sure. Now you've got this third wave of companies coming in. What has enabled that? What has enabled them to make the move now, and why were they holding back?
Well, I think this third wave were really a lot of companies that still, like that second wave, were sitting on the sidelines kind of watching what's going on, happy with the IT systems they had in place, doing well in their various verticals. And at this point now, what's starting to happen, I think, is they're seeing competitors move to the cloud, and competitors even being born in the cloud now, and seeing the agility that they're getting out of it, and now the maturity of the cloud to be able to support it, the kind of processes and tools that we have in place that we've made for them to be able to migrate and support the migration is now, it's not we've got to figure it out in our own phase anymore, like it was maybe in the first and second waves.
Sure. You announced that you acquired a migration company yesterday.
That's right. Yeah. You informed me.
I told you about that because you didn't actually know that.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
How big has Azure become that you can't
big.
You don't even know who you're buying anymore?
Yeah, it's pretty big. There's tens of thousands of people now at Microsoft that have Azure in their organization name. And then, of course, it is the foundation for modern Microsoft. Sure. If you take a look at Office or Xbox or Bing, they're all built on top of Azure.
I think that's something worth stressing. You talked to me about that backstage. How important has Azure become for Microsoft?
It is, like I said, it is the foundation of the company. Like without Azure, Office can't be successful. And even for the products that, as we were talking about Backstage, that don't seem to have a direct tie into Azure, the mentality is how can we help drive Azure with a lot of the products and services. How can we make Azure, have customers get more benefits of the cloud with using these other products that aren't directly Azure related?
Sure. So what's your recommendation for the companies that want to move to the cloud? Maybe they have a lot of older workloads, that just traditional workloads that need to move, or they can't move yet, or just what are you telling them? So
I think every company is unique in terms of the complexity they've got, in terms of their appetite for migration and the speed of migration, and their existing data center footprint and what they've got to do with that, and the kind of systems that they've got that their IT depends on. But the general pattern is, if you've made that commitment, we're going to go to the cloud. And a lot of the times the commitment comes with, we're going to cut our data centers footprint. We're going to consolidate down from 5 or 6 down to 1, have the cloud be the second kind of site. If you're going to be aggressive about that, then the playbook is lift and shift the things, whatever you can, lift and shift, except for your most complicated, most mission-critical kind of core business applications. Just simply get them up into the cloud and do some kind of light optimization that's going to make it so you're you don't break the bank on the way doing it, like you're doing shutting down the systems when they're not in use, doing auto scaling, right sizing them, putting them in containers if you can. Then for the more complicated applications, the ones that you actually are investing in that are driving your business, modernize them after they're in the cloud. Now there's a third category applications that I see, which is the very complicated core business applications, and those you obviously can't lift and shift very easily. You don't want to sit and modernize them on premises, and so a lot of times you got to take a look at those closely and decide what to do with them. What we typically see is you modernize parts of them, moving them to the cloud, leaving other parts on premises, and do this kind of migration over time. If that's not possible because they're too tightly integrated, the compute and data, then we have an example of this, Microsoft Sales application, or a huge monolithic SQL application running on HP Superdomes. Microsoft's getting more and more transactional, and so the load on those kept growing. We kept on getting bigger and bigger Superdomes. We were going to run out of headroom, and so for that kind of application, which is very complicated, we literally just created another version of it, brand new, in the cloud, cloud native, ran them side by side for a while with the on-premises one, and then flipped the switch and moved over.
But when these companies move to the cloud, they're also encountering a totally new set of complexities. There's just so much choice. I don't even want to know how many products Azure has at this point. And plus, I've got the two other hyperclouds I could go to. How do I even make those decisions?
Yeah, that's besides the skilling, that's the other challenge, is keeping up and figuring out what technologies to use when. And the pattern that I've seen their enterprises adopt is to create centers of excellence. And that's actually now become our guidance to companies, is for whichever cloud providers you pick, create a center of excellence that's focused on that cloud provider. For
every one you pick.
For every one you pick, yeah. Because these are the most complicated platforms in the history of computing. And they're constantly changing, and so you can't expect one person to be experts on more than one of them.
Now, partly that's your fault that they're so complex.
Well, it's not our fault, it's our customers, actually. I'd blame it on our customers because they're asking for these things.
You're blaming the customer. That sounds like bad business.
No, it's a good thing. I mean, we're delivering what they want, actually, I think.
Sure. And
they need to be successful.
Well, their needs are very
they're very diverse,
too.
right?
Yeah, totally. But you mentioned multiple clouds, so we can play buzzword bingo all day, but let's talk hybrid cloud and multi-cloud for a moment, because that's something that everybody wants to, is definitely thinking about. What are your recommendations there? And actually, how do you define hybrid and multi-cloud? Because everybody has a different one.
So the way that I do, and I see different definitions used all over the place, but the way that I define it is hybrid means enterprise IT on premises in data centers that I own or lease, and also IT workloads in a public cloud provider. Multi-cloud I define as in one or more public clouds. And so you can be hybrid without being multi-cloud, and you can be multi-cloud without being hybrid.
Sure.
And
do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are people actually doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So born in the cloud companies, I'll see sometimes they'll choose to be multi-cloud. And definitely, it's very common for an enterprise moving to the cloud to be hybrid and multi-cloud. I also see enterprises going single cloud, picking single cloud.
Sure. And then once I've made that move to the cloud, it's the first day. We talk a lot about second day at this point, because a lot of companies have been there. What are your recommendations there? Because now I have to operate all of this.
Yeah. Well, recommendations in what sense?
How do I manage that? Is it the center of excellence that helps me to do that?
Yeah. So what I recommend is, even before you start to migrate, have this center of excellence, which is working closely with IT and with the security organization and the compliance people, figure out what it means to operate secure, compliant workload in the cloud. Come up with a CI/CD pipeline, come up with templates, come up with policy.
Sure.
For different categories, classes of applications. Those that are extremely sensitive have different security controls than ones that might be public facing. But having established that, and as much as possible having what we call blueprints, actually, in place, Azure blueprints that serve as policy templates that then you can assign to organizations or applications such that they meet the requirements of the company as they're being deployed, and it's not an after the fact.
Sure, sure. Let's continue with the buzzword bingo. Edge computing.
Yeah, Edge. So Edge is now part of Microsoft's worldview at this point. We call it the intelligent cloud, intelligent edge, or we're building the world's computers, how we describe Azure now. And Edge is obviously part of that intelligent cloud, intelligent edge worldview, where Edge, in my definition, would mean computing that's not IT outside of an IT data center.
Okay. So for a lot of people say, "Oh, my phone is an edge device." You don't buy that.
I personally don't categorize phone as edge, but more ambient computing.
Sure, sure. Is edge something every company should be looking at, though? Do you think this?
I don't think so. I think a lot of companies do, but I don't think it makes sense for every single company to have an edge presence. Companies that are delivering services, consumer-facing services, might just be in their own data centers or a cloud data center. But the obvious places are smart buildings and cities and factories and hospitals and oil rigs.
Right.
And, those are all edge categories.
Sure, sure. And as these companies are moving now, they also have to think about AI, ML, and make just operationalizing all that data they're collecting.
Yeah.
Talk about complexity.
The world, so it's kind of interesting because I think the world is getting more complex and yet simpler at the same time in some ways. If you take a look at just a public cloud, the homogeneity you get, the fact that everything is API driven, makes managing resources, applications, simpler than it used to be on premises. You can, with an API query, see all of your virtual machines and all your databases and all your network endpoints in your public cloud deployment. With enterprise IT environment, that's an archaeology expedition that can take who knows how long, and you might not even see everything. So in some sense, that part is simpler. And the more complex sense is that there's a lot of options out there, like you pointed out earlier. If I want a database, well, there's 10 different databases I can pick from that are even offered as a service. Not that and there's another bunch of options that I can bring myself up into a cloud environment. So yeah, the complexity in that sense, the access to different technologies and capabilities is so at your fingertips that brings an inherent complexity.
Now, the way some of your competitors are working around that is by focusing on very specific verticals and offering solutions for them. Google especially is doing that. Is that something you've looked at or you're thinking about?
Yeah, well, so I think we've got at Microsoft a slightly different approach than some of the other companies out there that are in public cloud space. Well, for one, we're a platform company. That's what Microsoft's always been, is a platform company. So we don't want to compete. We don't compete and want to compete with our enterprise customers. So you won't see us create a healthcare solution. You won't see us create an autonomous autonomous vehicle. What we'll do instead is we'll want to support enterprise customers that are in those spaces by creating platforms for them. So a health platform, an autonomous vehicle training platform. Those are things that we would do, but we wouldn't compete directly.
Sure, sure. Now Google has very publicly said they want to be number 2 in the next couple of years. You're currently number 2. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think we've got some great strengths. That's
how you feel about it?
That has led to us being number 2. Our enterprise background, I think, is a huge one. The fact that Microsoft's been working with enterprise for decades at this point, the fact that we've got the largest enterprise field organization that has deep relationships and understands the enterprise, and we've got an engineering culture that has been grown up around serving the enterprise, understanding enterprise needs and meeting them, I think is one of the huge differentiations that we've got in that area.
And do you have ambitions to be number 1? Well, of course you do. But do you think you can? Do you have a shot?
So that's not the way that we look at it. It's not. I don't come to work every day saying, "Hey, what does it take to be number 1?"
I want to beat Amazon.
Yeah, it's not. It's really about, hey, how can we help our customers be more productive? And I think that if you listen to Satya, it comes from his framing of the culture for the company, which is focus on meeting the customer's needs, focus on delivering and partnering with the customer, and success will follow. And so that's the kind of approach that we've got.
Sure. We're almost out of time, but personal question. You're a huge Star Wars geek, and you collect memorabilia.
That's right.
But you don't collect the cheap kind of memorabilia.
Unfortunately not.
What's the next thing you're bidding? For that stuff, you actually have to go to auctions. What's the next thing you're bidding on?
Actually, I don't want to advertise it in case there's other people that might want to bid with bid for it.
Well, okay. So you're not going to talk about it?
Well, there's actually an interesting prop that's going on auction later this month, which is the Darth Vader helmet that was from Empire Strikes Back, the Luke, I'm your father helmet, which is pretty iconic.
Now everybody's going to bid on that.
Yeah, great. You tricked me into it.
Thank you. Thank you for spending your honeymoon with me.
Thanks, Frederick.
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks, Mark.